It's Monday, April 28th, 2025. Pope Francis laid to rest. Scott Bessent says we're making progress on deals, and a prominent Epstein accuser is dead by suicide? Come on now. Next on the AM Update. Pope Francis has been laid to rest in Rome's St. Mary Major Basilica. Earlier over the weekend on Saturday, hundreds of thousands of people gathered at the Vatican to mourn the late pontiff. Foreign delegations from 164 countries attended the funeral, including President Donald Trump, who met with Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky. After that 15-minute meeting, which the White House described as very productive, President Trump posted on Truth Social, quote, "There is no reason for Russia to be shooting missiles into civilian areas, cities, and towns over the last few days. It makes me think that maybe he, Putin, doesn't want to stop the war." So an interesting development in the midst of President Trump and President Zelensky's, the green shirt from Ukraine, during their impromptu meeting at the Vatican over the weekend. Back at home, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says there's a double standard he's seeing in the media.
When I look at some of the things that are being published, there was a story 10 days ago that said this is the worst April for the stock market since the Great Depression. 10 days later, the NASDAQ is now up on the month of April, and I haven't seen a story that says, "Oh, stock market has biggest bounce back ever." So
it certainly has gone back and forth.
I think a lot of this is media driven.
So Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, calling out the media for their incredible double standard. Keep in mind that comment later on in the episode when I talk about David Sachs in his commentary on a dirty little secret the media is playing when it comes to the trade negotiations. Bessent continued,
"You're not going to tell the person on the other side of the negotiation where you're going to end up, and nobody's better at creating this leverage than President Trump. He's shown the high tariffs, and here's the stick. This is where the tariffs can go, and the carrot is come to us, take off your tariffs, take off your non-tariff trade barriers, stop manipulating your currency, stop subsidizing labor and capital, and then we can talk." But I tell you, Martha, that we've had several of these Asian countries that come in and said, "Oh, well, we'll stop doing this, this, and this." And I look at these lists, and I think, how did we get here? How did we get here? Because this trading system has been so unfair. And as President Trump says, I don't blame the countries. I blame the previous administrations that let them get away with it.
Bessent made those comments on ABC News this week, saying that the plan is working in terms of creating leverage to bring people, other countries, to the negotiating table. Moving on, we are now arresting judges, plural. Late last week, a judge in New Mexico was arrested on federal charges of shielding a foreign gang member. And then on Friday, another judge in Wisconsin was arrested for obstructing the pursuit of another illegal alien. Pam Bondi says she has no regrets and says if you're a judge that's engaging in obstruction and other illegal activities, they're going to come after you next.
We are going to prosecute you, and we are prosecuting you. I found out about this the day it happened. We could not believe, actually, that a judge really did that. We looked into the facts in great depth. That's her picture up on the screen, Hannah Dugan, who is now in custody. You cannot obstruct a criminal case, and really, shame on her. It was a domestic violence case of all cases, and she's protecting a criminal defendant over victims of crime.
So that is Attorney General Pam Bondi warning other would-be judges around the country who are thinking about helping illegal aliens, in this case, somebody suspected or at least charged with domestic violence in the case of that Wisconsin judge. She says they're going to come after you next. Now, the story goes with Hannah Dugan in Wisconsin that Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers came to the courthouse where Hannah Dugan was presiding over the case of an illegal alien in a domestic violence case. She heard that the Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers were outside the courtroom, so she went out into the hallway, started screaming at these ICE officers, went back into her chambers, told the illegal alien suspected domestic violence perpetrator to follow her, let that illegal alien out through a private entrance, and now she's crying because she got arrested. That is textbook obstruction, if you ever asked me. The deportations will continue until morale improves. Update. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced Sunday morning that DEA, as well as a bevy of Colorado law enforcement, apprehended over 100 illegal aliens at an underground nightclub frequented by various gang members like Tren de Aragua and MS-13. Cocaine, meth, and pink cocaine were seized. 2 people were also arrested on existing charges. And then there's this in Florida. Nearly 800 illegal aliens, including violent fugitive gangbangers, were rounded up in a massive first-ever sweep by Florida cops working with federal immigration agents. Operation Tidal Wave, a joint effort between the feds and local police in the Sunshine State, needed just 4 days to round up and lock up hundreds of members of some of the nation's most wanted illegal aliens. Among those rounded up were members of the vicious gang MS-13 and other crews, as well as Russian national on the run from Interpol. That's according to a report from Fox News. So good news, the deportations will continue until morale improves. Here is Secretary of State Marco Rubio. You've heard about that story, maybe, of some of those younger children who the media says were deported mistakenly, along with their mothers. Well, the Secretary of State Rubio clears that up.
Is everyone on U.S. soil, citizens and non-citizens, entitled to due process?
Yes, of course. But let me tell you, it looks in immigration standing, the laws are very specific. If you're in this country unlawfully, you have no right to be here and you must be removed. That's what the law says. Somehow over the last 20 years, we've completely lost this notion that somehow or completely adopted this idea that, yes, we have immigration laws, but once you come into our country illegally, it triggers all kinds of rights that can keep you here indefinitely. That's why we were being flooded at the border. And we've ended that. And that's why you see a historically low number of people not just trying to cross our border, trying to cross the border into Panama, all the way down in the Darien Gap. I mean, it's been a huge help for those countries as well. On the headline, that's a misleading headline. Okay, 3 U.S. citizens, ages 4, 7, and 2, were not deported. Their mothers, who are legally in this country, were deported. The children went with their mothers. If those children are U.S. citizens, they can come back into the United States if there's their father or someone here who wants to assume them. But ultimately, who was deported was their mothers who were here illegally. The children just went with their mothers. But it wasn't like, you guys make it sound like ICE agents kicked down the door and grabbed the 2-year-old and threw him on an airplane. That's misleading. Yeah. That's just not true.
Just to be clear, because I do want to get to the overhaul at the State Department, is it the U.S. policy to deport children, even U.S. citizens, with their families, and I hear what you're saying, without due process? Just to be very clear there.
Well, No. Again, if someone's in this country unlawfully, illegally, that person gets deported. If that person is with a 2-year-old child or has a 2-year-old child and says, I want to take my child with me, well, then you have 2 choices. You can say, yes, of course you can take your child, whether they're a citizen or not, because it's your child. Or you can say, yes, you can go, but your child must stay behind. And then your headlines would read, U.S. holding hostage 2-year-old, 4-year-old, 7-year-old while mother deported. So the parents make that choice. I imagine those 3 U.S. citizen children have fathers here in the United States. Yeah. They can stay with their father. That's up to their family to decide where the children go. Children go with their parents. Parents decide where their children go. Right. The U.S. deported their mothers who were illegally in America.
Exactly right. So if the United States had not actually sent those children along with their deported mothers, Marco Rubio is exactly correct. The headlines would be, ICE splits up families in the name of Trump's radical deportation program. Just a complete and total nuking of this narrative that you've seen recently in the last few days from the media regarding deportation efforts as far as where children happen to be involved. Border czar Tom Homan says overall, things when it comes to immigration are on the right path.
Look, I think we've been very successful, and we got the most secure border in the history of this nation, and President Trump was able to accomplish that in 7 weeks. That's something that Joe Biden didn't and wouldn't do in 4 years. Well, yeah, the more money we have, the more we can do. The border is the most secure it's ever been in the history of this nation, but we need more funding for interior operations, ICE operations, to arrest those public safety threats, national security threats, and others from the United States. Again, the numbers are about 3 times higher than they were during the Biden administration as far as ICE arresting the interior, but with more money, we can do more.
And finally, before our break, here is the White House Correspondents Association's dinner with Eugene Daniels of MSNBC.
We journalists are a lot of things.
No, you're not.
We are competitive and
pushy.
You're not. Nope. We are impatient, and sometimes we think we know everything. But
all the time.
We're also human.
All the time, you know everything.
Our families and significant life.
Pretty sure you're not human, actually.
We care deeply about accuracy and
no, you
seriously the heavy responsibility of being stewards of the public's trust.
You don't even know what a steward is.
What we are not is the opposition.
Yes, you are.
What we are not is the enemy of the people, and what we are not
yes, you are.
is the enemy of the state.
Yes, you are. Yeah, you're all of those things. Yeah, they're just... Other than everything you say being bass backwards, Eugene Daniels, great speech, bro. When we come back, are you kidding me? One of Jeffrey Epstein's most prominent accusers dead by suicide after being hit by a bus? And an update on that DC helicopter crash in January involving a military helicopter. That's coming up next. Virginia Jufri, a woman who accused Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew of abuse when she was underage, has died by suicide. Jufri, 41 years old, was one of Epstein and Andrew's most prominent accusers, filing a lawsuit against the English royal in New York in 2021, claiming she was forced to have sex with him 3 times between 1999 and 2002 when she was underage. Jufri died in Neargaby, Australia, where she had been living. Just weeks ago, she made headlines for saying she had just 4 days to live following a collision with a bus. First responders found Jufri unresponsive near her home in Perth, and a local authority said her death is being probed by major crimes detectives. But the early indication, of course, is that the death is not suspicious. So just a few weeks ago, one of Jeffrey Epstein's and Prince Andrew's most prominent accusers was hit by a bus. She posted in the interim that she was feeling fine, although she also said she only had a few days to live. But she posted that she's not suicidal, that is. And then she dies by suicide just last week. I'm inclined to believe that that's actually true. I just can't believe that whoever is responsible for Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself would just go back to the old, tired tricks for one of his most prominent accusers. Quickly, you remember that DC helicopter crash in January that killed 64 people, including 12 children? Well, it turns out the female pilot who was flying was given multiple warnings and was directly told by her male instructor or co-pilot to turn the opposite direction of the passenger jet to avoid a collision. This is the helicopter, the military helicopter pilot. Here is the report from NBC News, which is buried down to the bottom of the story. He, that would be her co-pilot, told her he believed that air traffic control wanted them to turn left toward the East River bank. Turning left would have opened up more space between the helicopter and Flight 5342, which is headed for runway 33 at an altitude of roughly 300 feet. She did not turn left. That was Captain Lobach. Captain Lobach, the pilot of the military helicopter, which collided with that domestic airlines flight, killing 64 people and 12 children. Why in the world would you not turn left when instructed to do so? There's also parts of this report that the instructor/co-pilot, we're not really sure of the military helicopter, was telling Captain Lobach, the female pilot, telling her to watch her altitude. And that was before he told her to turn left, to give them more space between themselves and that jet. I'm not really sure. I hope it was just an accident. That's all I can say. And finally, there's this. Going back to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's commentary towards the beginning of today's episode, talking about how there are stories all over the media just about 10 days ago, about a week and a half ago, about how April suffered the biggest decline in the market since the Great Depression, yet there's no stories about the rebound. Here's David Sachs, businessman, on the All In podcast, talking about a pretty under-the-radar yet nevertheless naked tactic that the media is currently engaged in, and it has to do with Treasury Secretary Bessent.
There was a tweet 2 weeks ago when all this started by Nick Carter that I retweeted because I thought it was really interesting, which was, if you think a market sell-off delegitimizes Trump's presidency, you're going to give him unconditional credit when it rallies, right? Because those are the rules now. And that's exactly what's happened, is that the market has rallied. Like you said, it's up 7% this week. But the media doesn't want to give Trump any credit for it. So it's kind of created this narrative of a Bessent put. In other words, Bessent is entirely responsible for it. Look, Scott is a very smart man. He understands markets. He understands the bond markets. And he is a reassuring voice to those markets. And I think he's doing a great job. But I think part of what's going on with this Bessent put narrative is that no one ever wants to give Trump or his administration as a whole credit. So what they do in any particular week is valorize a particular member of the administration that they can then say, well, this is the person who's really responsible for this, not Trump, because they don't want to give Trump that credit. Next week, they'll be tearing Scott down, and there'll be some other member of the administration they'll be trying to valorize to basically prevent the administration as a whole from getting credit for doing something good. So again, I think Scott's doing a great job. I think he's doing a great job making these deals, and he's saying a lot of correct and reassuring things to the markets. But I think if the media is going to tear Trump down every time the market goes down, you have to give him credit when the market goes back up. And I think there's just a general reluctance to do that.
That's David Sachs on the All In podcast. And in case you're wondering, yeah, I saw the very same phenomenon he noticed. Just last week, the American Prospect, it's a very left-wing publication based in Washington, D.C., ran this headline: "The lone grown-up in Trump's room," talking about Treasury Secretary Bessent. So yes, that's a slimy tactic that the media and the left, although I repeat myself, this is a sleazy tactic that they're using. Anytime anything bad happens, it delegitimizes the whole of the Trump administration. Anytime anything good happens or any sort of rebound happens, well, it just legitimizes one person in the Trump administration. That's the game that's being played. And I see some on the right falling for this. So what's the antidote? Relax. R-E-L-A-X. Relax. Just continue to let things play out. You don't have to fall for, and you don't have to just react to everything in real time all of the time. And believe me, as somebody who follows the news closely, it's very difficult for even me to do this. Heck, on Friday morning, I was just overjoyed at the news of plural judges being arrested. When the news came out about the Wisconsin judge who was arrested for obstruction in the case of an illegal alien that ICE was trying to get. And then I saw that Kash Patel had deleted the tweet where he had made this announcement about this judge getting arrested. And I posted something about that. And then I saw that U.S. Marshals had actually told Axios, or another publication, that they've got this judge in their custody. And I posted again. If you react to every single jot and tittle every single day, you'll drive yourself nuts. So just relax. That'll do it for a Monday. Housekeeping note again. I'm not actually here the next 2 days. I've caught a couple of best of episodes, and I'm using best in the loosest possible sense. I have a couple of best of episodes, if nothing else, for the algorithm to keep it happy, because it really gets upset when you post consistently for months on end, and then you've got multiple days in a row where you're not posting anything. So those will be the next couple of days. Maybe back again on Thursday, not totally sure yet. Definitely again back on Friday and Saturday for No Suck Saturday. Hope you have a wonderful week. Talk to you again, hopefully on Thursday, but if not on Thursday, on Friday. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.